Continuing S1319 here, and I want to be more specific, that if who you are doesn't affect something of the physical that will trigger other people's sight, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching, the senses, then it can't be detected by the physical, and therefore we don't know that it exists. In other words, I only infer your existence from what the senses tell me. And if you're not triggering something in the physical that will affect my senses, I don't know of your existence. If you're giving a series of sounds that make sense to me in my experience, then I think I'm thinking what you're thinking now, which is what you're doing at the minute. You're trying to think what I'm thinking. And I'm only communicating that by transferring my thoughts into words that have symbolic meaning to you. And as I say, much is lost in that transfer, in that your symbolic understanding of the sounds that you're hearing are not quite the same as my symbolic understanding of those sounds that I'm sending, those words. But we get the impression that there's another thinking being present from the sensory information we're receiving. When we stop receiving that sensory information, we assume the other person doesn't exist. The body hasn't moved for 10 minutes. It doesn't seem to be moving. It's not breathing. It's not speaking to us. It's not moving. Oh, I think he's dead. Oh no, he's asleep. He just wasn't breathing deeply enough for me to notice, but now I notice. And I say, oh, he's alive. Do you see, we are dependent on recognition of life only from the recognition of your being only from the way you're affecting the physical, and that the physical is affecting my physical, because it's only my physical I'm connected to, not yours. So I don't have a reality of your existence unless I'm seeing something in the physical of you that I identify as you. In other words, I associate it with this visual body that I'm looking at. If I don't see that, then I don't feel you're still around and present. In other words, I don't feel you exist. But if I were connected directly to your thoughts, then I would know you're still thinking. But thinking is a strange thing if you now think about thinking. I only notice I'm thinking if I recognize the thoughts that are happening and associate them with some thought I also have of self. So if I close my eyes, and assuming I'm not in pain, in other words, I'm not particularly aware of the body. Am I able to think of nothing for a minute? Well, not quite, because to know I'm thinking of nothing, I have to be aware of such. In other words, I have to be thinking. When I stop being aware of me, the thinking may still be continuing, but I'm not associating it with the me of here and now, this physical me, and its local history. It's no longer tied to the body. I'm just back as part of the many thoughts that exist, but they're not identified as being specifically by me. Unless I have some recollection of. You see, I think we are a bundle of thought. And the degree to which it's held as a bundle is my individuality, like a sort of clotting in the universal mind or the mind of God. It's a sort of construct, like a theory in itself. And we change these theories somewhat when we enter into physical life experience. We wake up back in the body that exists, or we wake up in a new body that comes into complex history. And we experience more. We add to our thought body, which is a cumbersome way of saying what we've always said, our spirit. And our spirit or our soul, I think they're the same, are a thought entity, a combination of thoughts that hold together what we call a person. I've said persons are something to do with particular values, which are in a sense, well, they imply purposes. They imply inclinations and desires to be one thing, not something else. To value some types of thoughts and very definitely not value others, reject them in fact. So they are distinct clusters, persons are distinct clusters, bundles of thoughts that involve values and intentions, inclinations. As regards what thoughts they wish to collect and what thoughts they wish to reject and not be part of. In other words, we are what we're thinking, but I don't know what you're thinking unless it's communicated by the physical. What matters is what you're thinking. And I'm steering towards thinking that's acceptable to my values and inclinations. And I'm not collecting, even repelling, refusing to accept thoughts that are alien to such. And I develop through time now to be a bundle of thoughts that's in harmony, peace, joy, hope, happiness. I seek the security of the support of someone wonderful. It's called God and the fellowship of heaven. And I need to be consistent with their harmony and intentions, desires. If I'm to be acceptable to them, part of their fellowship, relating in harmony, or rejected by them if not. And so I'm learning, and every now and again I come into a physical great restriction compared to the freedom of the thought world, where the physical imposes on me limitations of thoughts and experiences that I might want to reject but can't, and have to experience it. And this modifies my personhood, sometimes such that I adjust what my values and inclinations are, because I've experienced now something different which I might not have wanted to particularly experience, but it's changed who I am in the thought bundle, the personhood. And in a sense, I'm now a changed bundle, a changed person. And ideally, as I understand it, more in harmony with that which will bring this bundle, this personhood of me, life, joy, everlasting peace. Now, by life, I don't mean now life in the physical. I mean life in the freedom of the mental, the spiritual, that gives me greater or full access to a wonderful harmony of heaven, the host of heaven. I've gone through an experience in the physical that draws me nearer to acceptability, to consistency with such harmony. And so being born into this physical world can be a great blessing. And we have the religious type notions that perhaps we're helped by spirit beings that focus on this ministry of angelic ministry of helping. We may see some actions of the spirit beings that bring us into a physical world that we don't want, suffering, slavery, imposition, pain, contrary to our values and purposes. And we may identify such as satanic, evil, and we flee from them. And we're meant to, but we're also meant to experience them to some extent here. You know, I do break the cups or drop or burn my hand a little and, need it to repair. I do suffer changes that I don't wish to experience, and it does have an impression on my personhood, shifts my values slightly to be more against being careless, more against mindlessly putting my hand under the hot tap when I turn it on in case it's too hot now. In other words, this evil is a blessing. It's training my personhood to seek that which is good, that which is harmony, that which is a blessing. True in terms of this classroom that I'm in, this physical world. I was thinking on that previous, is it 1319, S1319, whichever the previous one is to this, I'll call this B and the other one A when I adjust it. And hang on a second. I was thinking that in some sense our apparent personhood's a bit like an iceberg. We see the bit above the water, but the bit that's under the sea is nonetheless the bulk of what the person is. And if you can now imagine for a moment, not the usual mechanics of buoyancy and so on, but if I cut off the bit that's visible, well, I don't see the person. Or if I pull from underneath the iceberg down, it suddenly does not appear. It would think, oh, it's gone. Iceberg doesn't exist anymore. But you crash into it with your ship because it's still just under the surface, In other words, you are not just the person that's on the surface either. And you and the iceberg underneath the surface can certainly still experience each other if you crash into each other. Okay, not too good of an analogy, but something to say quite simply. Well, the person is not just what you see. In fact, it's not even what you see. What you see is just a consequence. The person is that bundle of thought, values and intentions that consequent on those values, I suppose. And history, thought, memory of. It's that which is the person. And it only at times appears in the physical with some regularity with life that we experience and recognize. I've been me for what appears to be 77 years, although clearly I've been changing in shape and appearance and thoughts and values and intentions. I could stop having this physical continuity that you see, submerge, if you like, for a while, and then reappear as another shape and form. Instead of Marshall, I'm John so-and-so, John 17. Now, another person, I'm born again, if you like. Or I'm not. I simply don't need to return into this visible above surface sphere. I continue in the ocean of my fuller being, my larger being, and I don't need to be on the surface anymore. Or for a while, I might experience well, now if you can take an inversion of that, what I'm really saying is that our religions have seen it as we're in this physical world, which is a lower world, and when you wipe that out in death, you're still the bulk of yourself in the heavenly. And so what I'm saying is that your personhood is now only tiny bit manifesting in the physical realm. Nearly all of your vast personhood is in the heavenly realm, or if you like, and above in some sense, and that the heavenly realm is in fact embraces this classroom of the physical, but only uses that experience from time to time, like you only watch TV in the evening, and this evening you might be watching a particular film or the news, and tomorrow you'll be watching a different film and news. You are still the same person moving through time, but your body has changed slightly by tomorrow. You're using different molecules to some extent. Your inclinations have changed fractionally. Your values have changed fractionally. In fact, if I might complicate things for a minute, you might have just be associating with a different group of entities tomorrow evening to this, and therefore watching a different news, a different film, not just a rerun of today's film. Might be quite different tomorrow. You might not be watching this channel at all. You might be just reading a book and having a different sort of thought experience. My Father's house and many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. Now that might be your next one, but we hope it's, well, by hope we mean we purpose the better and want it. And ideally the eternal and complete, perfect harmony with the greater order of such personhoods. Which, if we are children of God, is God, and we, our personhood, is of like kind, but now in absolute harmony with Him. No longer a child, if you like, but matured adult person, perhaps who's gone through much childhood, some of which is living here in the physical limitations of thought, but experience that's necessary in some way to mould our childhood into mature adulthood, that we be in harmony with the kingdom and part of, as an adult, the host of heaven. In full appreciation of each other and the wonderfulness of what we think of now as our Heavenly Father in our childhood. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.